Ladies, are you the one who gets it all done? Always pushing forward, always striving, in the constant chase for success. When was the last time you took a moment just for you? We are always on the go, rushing from one task to the next, barely pausing to catch our breath. What if we took a moment to pause? Imagine listening in, really listening to the wind, your heartbeat, your soul. What if slowing down was the key? A chance to discover a deeper connection with yourself. And from that connection, expand it to those you love, to the moments that truly matter. Pause, reflect, connect. It's time to live fully from the inside out. Hello and welcome to A Soulful Pause. This is a space for conscious women who are shifting the world paradigm from the inside out. Here we slow the pace of conversation so wisdom can surface. We listen beneath the noise of achievement and urgency, allowing insight, lived experience, and soul-led leadership to come forward. Today's guest is Stephenie Foster. I'm so excited to talk to you, Stephenie. And she is a woman who whose work lives at the crossroads of strategy, advocacy, and deep commitment to women and girls around the world. So Stephenie is a lawyer by training and has served in senior roles across government, diplomacy, philanthropy, and advocacy. She has advised U.S. senators, worked at the U.S. Department of State, served at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, and most recently helped lead Afghan relocation efforts with a focus on the needs of women and girls. Such an incredibly important thing to do. And she is also the co-founder of Smash Strategies, an author and a public voice for feminist foreign policy in both theory and practice. Stephenie, I am so honored to be with you today, and I just really want to thank you for the work that you've done and that you are doing. And it's really an honor to speak with you.
Well, I thank you so much for having me, and I've so enjoyed meeting you and being able to talk to you ahead of time and really learn about how you are helping us reshape the way we think about women's leadership. So thank you so much for that.
You are so welcome, and I think we're going to have a really great conversation. I'd like to just kind of start off by asking you a little bit of a question to kind of talk about the human side of your work. And I'd like to just reflect back on a key phrase or value that uh, you've found to help you lead the work that you do in the human arena. I mean, there's a lot that goes into organizing this kind of assistance. And so outside of that, let's bring it in a little closer to ourselves.
Sure. And that is such a great question to really help think about what I've done over the course of my career and also what I've done most recently. I think for me, there are two things that have been really, really central in terms of how to think about what I want to do next, think about what I want to focus on.
Yeah.
And they are both values. I mean, one is the value that it brings us together here, which is understanding that, you know, everybody has a voice and everybody has a role to play. And that we need to respect that and figure out how to support people who are trying to make change, whether they're young, old, men, women, wherever they live. I think that's been a very strong value in my life. And I have been very driven by that, whether it was going to law school, or ensuring that I worked on issues about women in the legal profession, working on Capitol Hill, doing work around women in foreign policy. That's all been very, very critical. The second value, which is related but a little different, is the idea that we all should listen to each other, but also feel like we can participate. And in decisions that get made about our lives, whether they're big decisions or little decisions, policy or an individual sort of thing that happens to you on a daily basis. And so those are the things that have driven what I've wanted to do
Hmm.
over the course of my career and have made me think a lot about how to best do that, how to best be supportive. And also, I think maybe the third value is to be respectful of other people.
Mm.
We certainly don't always
Yeah.
and can't always agree with each other on everything, and in fact in a lot of cases there are some very big things people don't agree on, but I think it's very important to have that kind of conversation in a respectful way
Yes.
and understand that the person you're talking to, for the most part, is somebody who's come to their view of the world in a very genuine way. There
Hmm.
certainly are outliers to that, and you
Sure.
know we all know that. But I think we often forget that other people also come to the way they see the world in a very, very genuine way. And I don't want to undercut that, and I don't want to make people feel bad for that.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I think that it's so easy for people in general. We're just speaking generalities here around, people, they do come from their own perspectives, and no one can know all of the pieces that brought together and shaped a person's perception. And so to give each other the grace and the benefit of the doubt,
Mm-hmm.
that there are things that shape that, and no one can understand a person's full experience at
That
all
is
times.
so true. And I think because everybody has a backstory, everybody has
Yeah.
things that they don't necessarily share, not that they wouldn't, but you just don't know that about them.
Hmm.
I also say all the time, the only person I agree with 100% of the time is me. And sometimes I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time. So, there are people who we just have to be respectful of that, I think, and understand that. And I do like that you said give people grace, because that's a really important point.
Yes, and I think that we forget it in such a busy world where we are fitting in so many priorities and doing so much that we forget that sometimes. And that's part of why it's so important, in my opinion, to slow things down, and not necessarily meaning slow your life down per se. It's an internal slowdown
Hmm.
so that you're considering and more considerate of yourself and others. So
Mhm.
I'd like to just now switch gears a little bit more and talk about like your career that spans law, diplomacy, advocacy, and authorship. That's a lot to pack into one question. So, um, when you reflect on your path, what inner value or knowing has consistently guided your decisions? You laid out your top three values, which I really appreciate and love that you named immediately. So, are those the same values that consistently guide you when you do make decisions?
I mean, those are certainly big parts of it. I always start the conversation about decisions acknowledging that when we make decisions in our lives, we make those decisions with the information we have at the time. In retrospect, some of them are spectacular and some of them are okay, and sometimes we don't do a good job. So
Mm. Yeah, it's
it's
true.
it's not a straight line. And I say that often, that we get to where we are, and I've seen this. It's sort of a zigzaggy path. You go somewhere, you learn something and decide you either want to continue with that or not, and then you might kind of move back towards a different part of your path. But one of the values that has driven me a lot when I think about my career and my work is really a curiosity about uh, where I can learn something that helps me get to the next level, and
Mm,
where I can challenge myself.
yeah.
I know, so I'm a lawyer, and when I started off in law, I wanted to be a litigator, a courtroom lawyer,
Hmm.
which means you have to feel comfortable getting up and speaking in public in a courtroom, a very structured place, right?
Yes.
But still, that's your job. And I was, as a younger person, somewhat shy. I didn't love speaking in public. It was okay.
Uh-huh.
And I forced myself really to do something that I both wanted to do but scared me a little, which was get up all the time and speak in court. And I
Mm.
learned through that if you just, for me, if I just went and did it over and over and over again, I didn't have time to be scared. In fact, the being
Mm.
scared kind of held me back because it was energy I was spending on being scared, and I had to throw that out the window. So to me, it was a lot about thinking, what do I really want to do, even if it scares me? And how do I challenge myself to do that in a way that allows me to grow and allows me to take the next step in my career? So that's was a very strong value for me, understanding that the things I wanted to do weren't always going to be easy for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a good thing to bring up because most people tend to shy away from what they feel afraid to do. And it really is the nudge, right? It's the nudge. Like you chose to be a litigator. That's what that's a passion and a dream. And so speaking is part of it. So there's always pieces to the thing that we really love and want to do that will be scary, that will feel like that. And it sounds like you used it in a way to sort of fuel you forward.
I did. And I got a really good piece of advice along the way somewhere. And I think this is particularly relevant, I will say to myself, but I've heard a lot of other women in particular say this, is that
Hmm.
you don't have to be perfect. You
Yeah.
just have to go out there and do it. Of course, you don't want to make a huge mistake, like you say something that's wrong or incorrect
Right.
factually, or, yes, of course, but go out there and do it. And the more you do it, the better you'll be.
Yes. Yes.
And for
Go ahead.
me, I think that was a really important piece of advice because I started off thinking I have to get every single sentence perfect and I have to say it in a way that like I'm
Mhm.
speaking in paragraphs or whatever, we do. And that isn't really the case. And I think that's a very important thing to say. You certainly want to get better at it,
Mhm.
but getting better at it means you start at a place where you're not at 100%.
That's right. And I think you learn more about shaping yourself in your own voice through that process of refining.
Mm-hmm.
So I really love that. And when you've worked inside like powerful systems where change can feel slow and complex,
Mm-hmm.
and I've worked in an academic medical facility, so it's very bureaucratic. So I understand this slow pace of change that can happen and how complex it gets. So how do you stay connected to purpose when work asks both patience and persistence
Mm-hmm.
to be in the same space?
That's well, change, of course, happens because there are people both inside and outside a system pushing it, right? So
Yeah.
your advocacy in particular, but I think true all the time, understanding that there are people outside pushing the system,
Mhm.
advocating for change. Again, whether it's around a policy issue, say it's access to better research on women's health, just as
Yeah.
an example, which is a very important issue. Knowing that there are people outside who are good resources for you, they can help you. They can also be challenging because they're pushing you. They want you to do more than your institution probably allows you to do.
Hmm.
Uh, but understanding that relationship and feeling comfortable with that. I think part of being able to work in big institutions that are slow to change
Right.
and move by sort of consensus in an odd way, right? More people have to agree than disagree,
Yeah.
means that I have been very respectful of the people on the outside who are pushing the issue forward, understanding that we have different roles to play.
Hmm.
If you're on the inside, you have a different role than the outside. And I've had both. So I think that has helped, understanding from both perspectives. what it means to work in a big institution.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think specifically for a big institution, the most really salient example is working at the US State Department, which is, a very big and important department in our government that focuses on our relations with other countries. And it's, complicated because it isn't just, ensuring that we are helping consider how a country is considering peace or how they're thinking about solving conflict,
Yeah.
but there are lots of other regional issues and just so much going on. And people in the institution, I think, genuinely, again, trying to do the right thing. So for me, I think first of all, trying to develop good relationships with people in the institution in general, but specifically understanding what what is the imperative that this person is trying to meet, and how can I help them? How can
Hmm.
I help them understand that what I'm advocating for, in the case of the State Department, advocating a lot for focusing on the impact of foreign policy on women and ensuring that women's voices are part of our foreign policy decision making.
Yes.
How can I make that case to my colleague, the person in the next office, that if they do that, their job will be made easier.
Hmm.
And uh, it's not always easy, of course. I am somebody who I try to take the long view. Like, what is the long view? And that can be the long view can be a lot of things: 5 years, 1 year, 2 weeks. I mean, whatever the long view is. And what are we trying to accomplish? Like, what is the objective here?
Hmm.
How can I help push it forward, interacting with these particular individuals? And I think that has been a big part of how I've worked in institutions that are big and cumbersome, frankly.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, because I do think, I've also worked in smaller organizations where you have more freedom and you have more ability to move more quickly, but you don't always have the same impact. Bigger
Hmm.
organizations most often, they're at a bigger scale, so they have a bigger impact. And I think that's the trade-off too, for a lot of the ways I think about making an impact.
What would you say is, since you've done both, what do you prefer? Or is there just simply advantages to both? And so they kind of, balance each other out in a sense, as far as like within your own preference.
That's a really hard question because I've actually thought about that a lot. I think the latter. I mean, sometimes I enjoy being able to do more of what I just think is important and push it along. And that goes a lot to being an author.
Mm.
Even I did have a co-author on my second book, but that's a good example of, you're writing a book. It's how you see the world, what you want to put on paper. And it's a slower process, but that's what you think. As
Hmm.
opposed to being inside an institution,
Hmm.
I I've always said, for me, I do think it's very important to me, or very satisfying, to be able to feel like I did move the institution. I can see the change. I can see that, for example, there are more people who I worked with at the State Department who take into account the impact of what they do on women and girls. I think that's very satisfying,
Yes.
but it's a very different kind of satisfying than the feeling of writing something, or just being an entrepreneur and going out there and selling your product. They're different. And for me, I've felt comfortable with both, but not everyone is. And that is, I think, also the question of how people, or we all, navigate our careers.
Yeah.
Is that, where do you want to fall on that spectrum, and how does it change over time? Because it can change over time for a lot of reasons: your circumstances, what the other responsibilities are you have, or just the way you're thinking about the world.
Hmm.
I,
Hmm.
that's okay too.
Yeah, I love that, like everything that you're saying, what I see so clearly through the complexity of, working through relationships in the State Department and shifting perceptions and leveraging the impact that's needed in order to make change for women's inclusion. And what I hear you saying throughout is that connection is one of the biggest influencers.
Mhm. I think,
And so,
yeah.
yes, did you want to say something else about that?
Also, it goes back to what, and I mentioned that I think respect is a value.
Hmm.
Again, there are people who don't fall into this category, but for the most part, I think people, when they're trying to do their job,
Hmm.
particularly in an institution, it is mission driven.
Yeah,
The State Department is mission driven.
right.
Um, that people want to do a good job, and I don't think it's helpful to um, be confrontational or yell at people. I think it's better to try to convince people. I may disagree with them. That doesn't mean, by the way, that I'm not a very, like I could be very pointed, but it means that I'm respectful again of that person's what their job is, who they are, what their past experience has been, and
Mhm.
trying to bring that into the conversation so that I can try to move them. Like, I guess the phrase we all use is we need to meet people where they are.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's true.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that you're not, it's like you're not, the goal isn't necessarily to change who they are by any means. It's really just to open a doorway so that they can consider a different possibility.
Yes, absolutely. You're totally right.
And I love that. So, with your work with that prioritizes women and girls, since we were talking about bringing women's issues to the forefront, especially in the global and crisis context. What do you feel is the most misunderstood about women's leadership on a global scale? That's a big question.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to set the stage, I mean,
Hmm.
women are leaders in their communities most everywhere in the
Yeah.
world, with some exceptions. At places, for example, like Afghanistan, where I worked, women aren't allowed to be leaders, although they still are, but in a different way.
Yes.
So I think one of the most misunderstood things is actually that often our norms are that men are leaders,
Hmm.
and in the public sphere especially, and women might be are leaders, but more in the private sphere, meaning the family.
Right.
I think women are leaders in every sphere, and we as a kind of collective globally uh, disempower ourselves when we don't use that talent, when we don't use everyone's talent and voices and perspectives to really reach decisions and bring people together.
Hmm. Hmm.
I often think we see collectively women as victims. And often women are, of course, victimized.
Right.
I mean, that's the reality of violence, especially in conflict, is often very directed at women,
Yeah.
and in non-conflict situations. But women are not we not only victimized, but are leaders and want to take time and have a role in shaping how to resolve those conflicts,
Hmm.
or how to move forward and build stronger societies.
Yeah.
I think that is something you and I, and many people intuitively know, but it isn't necessarily yet part of the, I think, overall global consciousness about what we need to do to deal with a very, very complex set of issues that we face in the world, right? War, um, a lot of food insecurity, health
Mhm.
insecurity. I mean, the world, we could go on and on.
Right.
The rise in authoritarianism, all these things. And I think at times the fallback is we just need to have, men dealing with these issues because sort of they're of the norms around how we think about leaders. And I think that's not true. I think we need men and women, and again, people from different age groups and races and classes and perspectives to really be leaders, because you lose something when you don't have those perspectives. You might miss a very important piece of information that's relevant to resolving a conflict. And I do have a couple of examples I could use, but I think that's a really important thing. We need to acknowledge that women are leaders, and really, if we don't use that talent, it's to our detriment collectively.
I agree with you 100%. I would love to hear your examples because I have some very, um, I have some opinions of my own around this. And I would like to hear those examples from you around women in leadership and what you've experienced.
Sure. I mean, one really kind of classic example that gets talked about a lot is so the research shows that when women are engaged in peace processes, at higher levels, peace agreements last longer, and they last anywhere from like 2 to 10 years longer. Most peace agreements fall apart within about 5 years. That's sort of just generally in the world. So having women at the negotiating table, whether it is that is as actual negotiators or experts or civil society activists, is really important. There, an example of a conflict at a peace talks where the men on both sides, it's usually men with guns talking to other men with guns, were arguing over a boundary between two communities, and they kept talking about this river that was important. Everyone wanted this river inside their part of the country or boundary because it had water. And nobody had really gone out there and looked at it. And then there were some women who got involved who said, that river's been dry for years because that's where we used to wash our clothes and get water. And, so they're fighting over something that obviously important. I'm not undercutting the importance of water and the river and all that, but it wasn't there anymore.
Right.
And no one asked the people who went out there every day or every other day if they could to get water, because that's what women in many communities are the people who go out and get water and bring it back. So that's a really good example of just factually that that person who was in charge of this peace agreement negotiation didn't ask the right questions. And then another example is in another conflict situation, a little bit different, was in Northern Ireland when there were negotiations around ending what was called the Troubles and all the kind of conflict and bombings and things that were happening there. There weren't many women at the table, and the women finally just started their own political party and got enough seats that they could be at the table, because that was how you got to the table, was through your party had sort of enough stature that you got asked. And that really made a difference in terms of the way that, first of all, the conflict was resolved, but also what kind of issues were also taken into account. They experience war differently, they experience conflict differently, they have different needs to be reintegrated into communities because of the jobs they do. So, I think there are a lot of examples where you see that having women's engagement actually can ensure that these peace agreements or these peace negotiations really are more durable and last longer because they take more people's needs into account.
Do you think that there are differences in the way that women approach leadership? And would you say that there's, how do I want to ask this question? Women approach things differently just because we think differently. We have a different experience of the world. And I feel that sometimes that gets really discounted, that the perception that women bring to the table is an important one and really contributes to the larger picture. Do you see those differences in the room around the table?
I'm yes, generally, I think women are leaders in different ways. Again, they're always outliers in these conversations.
Right, yes. Not
Generalization.
every woman or every man, yeah.
Right. But yes, I think, this is sort of the flip side of gender norms.
Hmm.
We are socialized, right, to think about other people. We are
Hmm.
socialized to uh, try to make other people often look better. We're socialized to sort of create better social milieus, right? We want everybody to be happy. That's how we're socialized. And I think if you draw that into the leadership arena, it means that you're paying more attention to other people.
Yeah.
I think leaders aren't necessarily the people who stand at the front of the room and talk the most.
Hmm. Hmm.
The best leader is someone who certainly is going to have an opinion and a vision
Right.
and strategy, but they listen. And it's based on understanding that this is a communal and inclusive endeavor. We
Mhm.
can't get somewhere by ourselves. There's
Right.
also the famous phrase, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together,
Yes.
which I think is women are better at driving us to go together farther because of the way we're socialized. And because the way we, I think, see problems as very multidimensional. I I think most women are, first of all, very good at multitasking, but it means we are very multidimensional in the way we see the world. That's a really strong and important thing for good leadership.
I definitely agree with you. I think the work that I focus on around this with women is because I feel the way that, you've mentioned how women are socialized. We are such caretakers, overdoers, overgivers, the result of that is partially because we have like this underlying emotional chaos
Mm.
that there has not been a way that we've been taught to sift through our own emotions for a level of understanding that we then have that tendency to do all the things because that's the way that we are asked, and we're asked to, push down how we feel and to move forward. So I feel most women are high achievers.
Mhm.
And this doesn't have to look big. It can look like in your own backyard. I
Mhm.
mean, I think stay-home mothers are high achievers. I believe they are leaders as well, like you were saying earlier. And so if we are able to sift through some of that, we can have more women leaders,
Mhm.
is my point.
Yes. And it's interesting you say that because I totally agree with you. And if you look at a lot of the early women who got very involved in politics,
Hmm.
it's still true, but it was particularly true of the sort of earliest cohort. A lot of the women came out of like they were PTA presidents. Patty Murray from the state of Washington, she was very active on the school board. They were gun rights activists. They were people who, my old boss, Senator Mikulski from Maryland, she was a community activist who fought a freeway going through her neighborhood. And this is also true of men, but most men in politics, come from like they're business men, they're lawyers, they have that kind of classic
Right.
background. Many of the women, come from a more activist background and they are out of community groups. And I
Mhm.
think that is very important on your question of leadership. They bring that sensitivity that we have to pay attention to how decisions impact our families, our neighbors, our kids, and bring that to the conversation. So the thing I would say that's really important is most of all, women should feel like their voice is important and that they need to be part of the conversation about what's going on in their communities or their state or our country, but really knowing that women's voices are incredibly important and we shouldn't, feel like we can't be part of the conversation.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think that there can be it's not about making one sex better than the other. It really is a process of working in tandem. And isn't that where we will get the best results anyways? Because there's different ways of doing things, and that blended in the proper way can really be a very powerful thing that can move all kinds of different initiatives. So I'd like to just kind of talk a little bit about advocacy. And can we know that it can be very energizing and it also can be exhausting. How do you personally replenish or recalibrate or pause so that your work remains sustainable and aligned? Because you're dealing with a lot of very big issues. So how does that work for you?
For me, I I think we all have something like our sort of place we like to, go or do that makes us happy. So whatever that is, and
Hmm.
everybody is slightly different set of things. I'm somebody I like to, take a lot of walks. I like to go to the movies. I like to go to art museums. But I have come as I've gotten older to being okay with just saying, I've been doing advocacy around an issue for a long time. There's some other part of it that people are working on. I'm getting better at saying, I'm just going to step back for this one.
Mm.
By the way, it never lasts very long because then I feel like, okay, I stepped back for a few days and I'm ready to do something. But I think giving myself permission to saying, when I feel like I'm kind of getting close to maybe burning out, or I can just feel like this is getting to be a little too much, giving myself permission to pull back, um, and seeing how that feels for a little bit of time,
Hmm.
and then kind of go, getting energized again. I did something interesting a couple of years ago because I'm on some nonprofit boards all around foreign policy and then women, women's leadership and things like that. And I decided I wanted to be on an arts board. So anyway, it took a while, but I ended up on a theater board.
Okay.
For me, it was just very different. So
Mm.
it's an outside activity, but it's not an area where I'm particularly. I mean, I love the arts and I bring something to it, but it's not. It forced me again to learn something new and to use my free time,
Hmm.
that is, to focus on the theater and think about all the things you need to do when you're on the board of a theater, which is a business essentially, right? And it's
Right.
much
Yeah.
more about how you run a business than advocacy, though advocacy is part of it. And that was really, I think, a good thing for me because it also exposed me to a whole different group of people
Hmm.
who, again, have different things they work on, different perspectives.
Right.
And I found that to be actually very refreshing and kind of reinvigorating.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I have a theater kid, so this
Hmm.
is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And I totally understand that. I think that it's an experience that most people, if you haven't been close enough to it,
Mhm.
um, there's a whole other side that you don't see.
Yes.
And it's very interesting and eye-opening, and it changed the way I thought about artists. And anyways, I love that. If you were to, for women who are listening to us today, who feel called to create change in their own way, whether that's big or small, what inner question or awareness do you believe is essential before they begin to take action?
Well, my guess is that most women who want to do something know that there's an issue they want to address. Again, whether it's, in their neighborhood, whether it's in their kids' school or at their workplace, the way that, we think about what kind of products we buy. So I think my guess is they've already thought about like what's the issue.
Hmm.
It's important to, educate yourself, right, about what that really means, like what else is happening, how did we come to that issue being sort of on the table, what are the levers that can make a change. Sometimes it's, a new law.
Hmm.
Oftentimes it's really pushing. For example, a great example is if somebody really feels that they want to support, women-owned businesses or support local businesses. They don't, want to buy from large institutions. The change is really in yourself, right? You
Hmm.
have to figure out where you're going to spend your money. So it's not a legal change you're advocating for, but maybe you're advocating with your community or your friends or your family that we should all buy from a women-owned businesses as much as we can. And that is a great example of something that's about, there are a lot of resources out there, directories of women-owned businesses, of Black-owned businesses, of minority-owned businesses. And if there isn't, one piece of advocacy is to create a directory in your community of these are the businesses that are owned by women, or fit whatever your category is.
Yeah.
So there are things you can do that are both, around legal change, if that's what's important to your issue, but also around your own behavior. So I think educating yourself about what the levers are and asking, being very comfortable asking questions of yourself, of your neighbors, of people that are the decision makers around the issue, so that you are getting the best information possible to start that advocacy. I wrote this book around advocacy for women and girls, and a lot of it is how to help people ask those questions. And there are a lot of resources out there to help you figure out the question, get a better set of sort of background in your mind, and then move forward.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. I think that, do you think that it's also important for them to know their inner why they are choosing to do it?
Yes. I,
Because it's not just as I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's not just that they will. It's great to have a passion and an idea and to understand what it would take to do it all. It also is important for them to understand what it's going to mean internally, the output that it requires.
yes, and it's also important to have a solution to the problem.
Hmm.
Now, whether that solution actually ends up being implemented, I mean, some portion of it
Right.
hopefully will be. I think effective advocates are people who have a solution that they're putting forward. Again, whether you like it or not, from the outside, it's different than just saying, here's a problem and I'm really angry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, yes, but then where do we go?
Right.
How do we stop that freeway? How do we, ensure that there's a better system for dealing with domestic violence?
Right.
There are many, many issues. How do we ensure that girls, have good access to the information they need about bullying or
Hmm.
all those sort of things
Hmm.
that happen to you when you're a teenager? What is the solution? And I always say, to be an effective advocate, you want to be able to talk about the solution in a way that helps the listener understand why you're doing it and what would happen if they followed you, if
Hmm.
they were involved with you. Because it's very easy to say things like, I'm for good health care, or I'm mad about crime, or, all those things. But what is that? That doesn't, you can't visualize that. You
Right.
need,
What's it translate to?
right. What does it translate to?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So, anyone out there who is looking to do this, really do some inner homework and some outer homework, and really, because it's a kaleidoscope. There's so many different pieces that will integrate into the one issue that you're focused on. And so it's good to know what you're going to step into. And yeah, I love that. Thank you. I'd like to ask you, Stephenie, is there anything that you would like to make sure that the audience knows about your work? Um, even your books, that where they can find them, where can they, you know, what can they do to help even further? So please go ahead and advocate and tell us what.
Here we have them. Um,
Beautiful.
no, I think the most important thing, I mean, I feel I've been very privileged to work on a broad set of issues that are really important to me, but I think drive really positive change.
Yeah.
And, I've written these two books. I think the books are great, and we've gotten great play out of them. I've gotten a tremendous amount of opportunity to talk about them, with really audiences globally. But they are really a platform for me to do that. So they're available on, Amazon. They're available on Barnes and Noble. You can look on my website, which you probably will post it
I
somewhere.
will. Yes, I'll post all of this, by the way.
So which has the books. It also has something I do want to also just give a shout out. I've started over the last few years an Advocate of the Year award, and I've awarded it to a woman, an American woman who's worked in a space and really had a huge impact to empower women and girls.
Mm.
And, they've been a very broad set of groups that have received the award, several internationally focused, one focused on education in Afghanistan, one on working with women who are quite poor in Egypt on economic, sort of how to get them more economically engaged.
Mm-hmm.
One is a woman who has a great group in Richmond, Virginia, very local, sort of helping young Black women, with leadership kind of training and mentoring and things like that. So I also have that on my website. And it's a great example of really challenging myself to say, I care about these things. I'm doing all these big, sort of issues at the State Department, writing these books, but what am I doing to really help grassroots groups that are trying to make change? Mm. I love the big groups. I have nothing but good things to say about these, bigger charities, but I decided I wanted to really help smaller groups that were really at the grassroots, mm-hmm. working with people on a daily basis who need, the kind of help we all need, which is how to become, better leaders, better community members. And so I've been very privileged to be able to do that and have really enjoyed that.
I love that. I think that it's nice that, when you focus on those smaller grassroots groups, it then feeds into something larger. It becomes bigger than yourself, and that's a lovely thing to do. And I, like you said, it's not a comparison game. We're not comparing grassroots to larger charities that do great work. There's great work going on everywhere at all levels. And I think that it's a beautiful thing that you're helping grassroots organizations because they need that type of guidance. The level of information that you can bring into them will really only help them move farther along. So they need people like you to do that. And so thank you for doing it.
My pleasure.
Well, Stephenie, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you today. Is there anything else that you would like to say?
I mean, the only thing I will say is I really hope that, your listeners and everyone in their communities thinks about how they can really take their skills, their passion, their knowledge, mm-hmm. and make a difference.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way to end our conversation. So thank you so much. And to our audience, please know that all of the information that Stephenie has mentioned regarding her website and how to reach out to her and to get involved will be posted in our show notes, as well as both of her books that you can obtain on Amazon. And so please do that if you are interested in advocacy and making change and shifts and the issues around women and girls and policy, right? Did I catch all of that correctly? Okay, good. And so thank you everyone for staying with us and listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes. Loved having you. Thank you.